The bold challenge. In the heart of a distant galaxy, far beyond the reaches of Earth, lay the grand and majestic kingdom of Zereth. It was a place where technology and tradition blended together to create a society like no other. The beings who inhabited Zereth were advanced, possessing powers far beyond human comprehension. They were the alien species, the Zerethians, whose reign was built on their intelligence, strength, and the ability to reproduce year-round. The Princess of Zereth, a commanding figure with silver skin and eyes that shimmered like stars, had always been curious about the world beyond her planet. Princess Ilara was a powerful leader, known for her wisdom and strength, yet she had one trait that made her stand out. She was an explorer at heart. She had a deep interest in other civilizations, especially those from distant worlds. But there was one thing that had always puzzled her: humans. She had heard stories of Earth and its inhabitants, the strange creatures who lived on a small blue planet. Among the many peculiarities that fascinated her, one fact stuck with her the most: humans only reproduced seasonally. This was unlike the Zerethians, who could reproduce year-round, their species thriving in ways that humans couldn't even begin to imagine. To the princess, this was nothing short of unbelievable. One evening, while sitting in her royal chamber surrounded by holographic maps of the universe, Ilara pondered over the odd notion. Her fingers tapped impatiently on the surface of a glowing console as she mulled over what she had heard. She couldn't fathom how such a primitive species could survive if they couldn't reproduce whenever they wished. What kind of limitations did this create for their future? Was this a species doomed to struggle and suffer, or did humans possess something greater, something unseen? With a determined gleam in her eye, Princess Ilara made a decision. She would prove that humans could not possibly thrive with such a disadvantage. She would challenge them directly, daring them to come and explain themselves. The next morning, the royal palace buzzed with activity as word of the challenge spread throughout Zereth. The princess's orders were clear. She wanted to meet Earth's best representatives, to see if they could convince her of their species' worth. It wasn't just a challenge of reproduction. It was a test of the very essence of humanity. Could they overcome their limitations? Could they convince her that they were worthy of admiration despite their biological shortcomings? The challenge was simple, yet bold. Convince me, humans. Show me that you can thrive without reproducing year-round. If you fail, there will be consequences. If you succeed, you will earn my respect. Ilara's message was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching Earth within moments. The human race, intrigued and slightly confused by the alien princess's bold words, began to discuss who would be brave enough to take on the challenge. It wasn't just a matter of science or biology. It was a matter of survival. The best minds of Earth would have to come together, and the task of convincing the princess would fall to one brave individual. Meanwhile, Princess Ilara prepared for the upcoming arrival of the human representative. She thought about the possible answers they could offer. She had heard of humans being resilient, resourceful, and clever, but she still couldn't believe that such a species could truly thrive without constant reproduction. She imagined they would try to explain their seasons, their environmental rhythms, and their cycles. But no matter what, she felt certain that they could never prove her wrong. How could they? Days passed, and the tension in the palace grew. Ilara's thoughts were consumed by this challenge. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every hour, she found herself staring at the starry sky, wondering if the humans would truly be able to show her something that would make her rethink everything she knew. Her advisors and court officials tried to calm her, reminding her that she had seen the best minds from all over the galaxy, but nothing had ever quite intrigued her as much as the challenge she had set for the humans. Finally, the date arrived. A spacecraft from Earth landed on Zereth with a lone human aboard. A scientist, an ambassador, or perhaps a representative of the entire species. The human was nervous, yet determined to take on the challenge. This was no small task. The fate of Earth's reputation was in their hands. What if they failed? What if they couldn't explain the mysteries of human reproduction to the princess's satisfaction? The pressure was mounting. As the human exited the spacecraft and approached the grand hall, the suspense was palpable. The princess stood at the end of the hall, her silver eyes locked onto the human. She was ready, her mind sharp and questioning. The human would have to bring their best arguments, their most compelling evidence, to prove that humanity had more to offer than just seasonal reproduction. The human took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. They knew they were facing an overwhelming challenge, but they also knew that if anyone could convince the princess, it would be them. And so, with the eyes of an entire galaxy upon them, the stage was set for a battle of words, a battle of cultures, and a battle for humanity's future. As the first words were spoken, the suspense grew even deeper. Could this human really convince Princess Ilara that their species was more than its biological limitations? Or would they fail and face the consequences of their defeat? The answer would change everything. And so, the challenge began. The chosen human. In the heart of Earth's most prestigious scientific community, the news of Princess Ilara's challenge sent shockwaves through the global networks. The message was clear and direct. A highly advanced alien princess demanded to be convinced that humans could survive without the ability to reproduce year-round. The challenge, however, was more than just a scientific inquiry. It was a test of Earth's resilience, ingenuity, and ability to adapt. For days, leaders, scientists, and diplomats gathered in urgent meetings. There were discussions about the best way to approach the challenge, who would be the most suitable representative, and what arguments could possibly persuade such an advanced species. No one knew for sure what Princess Ilara expected, but they understood that failure was not an option. The future of humanity's reputation rested on this single moment. The decision was made. A young, brilliant scientist named Dr. Elena Carter would represent Earth in this high-stakes challenge. Elena was known for her sharp mind, her deep understanding of human biology, and her ability to communicate complex ideas simply and effectively. Despite her calm demeanor, she was nervous. This was the chance of a lifetime, but it also carried immense pressure. Could she truly convince this alien princess, who had never known limitations like humanity, that Earth's species could endure despite their seasonal reproductive cycle? The day of departure came quickly. Elena stood before her family and colleagues, her heart racing as she prepared to board the spacecraft that would take her to Zerith. The journey would take days, but there was little time to waste. She had to be ready. As she looked around at the familiar faces, Elena's thoughts turned inward. What could she say to the princess that would make her see humanity in a new light? She had read all the data, studied every scientific breakthrough, but this wasn't just about science. It was about showing a different side of humanity, their strength, resilience, and the power of human connection. Inside the spacecraft, Elena's thoughts kept her awake. She reviewed the facts. Humans may not reproduce year-round, but they possessed a unique ability to adapt to their environment. Their seasons were tied to survival, yes, but there was something more profound: the way humans built families, communities, and cultures that supported one another. Reproduction wasn't just a biological function for humans. It was a deeply emotional and social process, one that allowed them to form bonds that no alien race, it seemed, could ever understand. Days passed as the spacecraft glided through the vastness of space, and finally, Zerith came into view. The alien planet, bathed in the glow of a distant star, looked serene yet imposing from Elena's vantage point. She could only imagine the grandeur that awaited her upon arrival. But as her ship descended toward the planet's surface, her thoughts turned to the task at hand. Could she really convince Princess Ilara that Earth's worth went beyond biology? The challenge was looming, and Elena knew she had to find a way to break through the princess's skepticism. The spacecraft landed on the gleaming surface of Zerith, and Elena stepped out into a world that felt both alien and mesmerizing. The towering spires of the royal palace loomed in the distance, their surfaces shimmering with an otherworldly glow. She was escorted through halls that seemed to stretch on forever, each more magnificent than the last, until she reached the grand chamber where Princess Ilara awaited her. The princess was seated on a high platform, her silver eyes watching with intense curiosity. Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward, her nerves fading slightly as she locked eyes with the princess. Princess Ilara's gaze was penetrating, almost as if she were reading Elena's thoughts. The room was silent, save for the distant hum of advanced machinery. As the challenge began, Ilara's voice broke the silence, her tone both commanding and intrigued. "You are Earth's representative?" she asked, her voice echoing through the chamber. Elena nodded, finding her voice despite the weight of the moment. "Yes, Your Highness. I'm Dr. Elena Carter. I am here to explain the complexities of human reproduction and the resilience of our species." Princess Ilara tilted her head slightly, clearly intrigued. "You have been chosen to prove something that has always puzzled me. Humans, your kind, reproduce only seasonally. You cannot be serious about thriving without reproducing year-round. How do you survive?" Elena took another steadying breath. The moment had arrived. "Your Highness," she began, "while it is true that human reproduction is seasonal, this is only one aspect of our species. We are not defined solely by our biological processes." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Humans have found strength in our limitations. We've learned to adapt, to work together, to find new ways of surviving and thriving, even in the face of challenges." Princess Ilara raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Adapt, you say? Explain this to me. How does one adapt to such an inherent weakness?" Elena knew this was the crucial moment. The princess was looking for a reason to believe, but she also wanted proof. Elena looked directly into her eyes and spoke from her heart. "Humans don't just rely on biology. We rely on one another. We build communities, form families, and create connections that allow us to support each other. Our emotional bonds are what help us survive. When we face hardships, it's not just about reproduction. It's about finding strength in unity, in love, and in the will to continue. We have a deep capacity for resilience." The princess's eyes flickered, her expression unreadable. Elena continued, her voice steady and strong. "And while we may not reproduce year-round, we have something just as powerful: our ability to adapt. Humans have faced countless challenges, from famine and disease to war and environmental change, and we have found ways to overcome them. It's not our biology that defines us. It's our determination to keep going, no matter the odds." The princess was silent for a long moment, her silver eyes narrowing as she processed Elena's words. There was a shift in the atmosphere, an understanding starting to form. The challenge was not just about facts. It was about something deeper. Could Ilara see this strength in humanity, this ability to overcome the odds? Would she recognize that Earth's greatest strength lay not in its biology, but in its people? As the silence stretched, Elena couldn't help but wonder if, just maybe, she had made her first breakthrough. The first encounter. The grand hall of Zerith was a sight to behold. An endless expanse of silver columns, each one etched with patterns that seemed to move, as if they were alive. The air was filled with the soft hum of alien technology, and in the center of it all stood Princess Ilara, her imposing figure radiating authority. Her eyes, like twin stars, were fixed on Dr. Elena Carter as she entered the chamber. The human was nervous, but the princess showed no signs of impatience. Instead, she studied Elena carefully, as though weighing her very presence. Elena walked into the room, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness, the weight of the challenge heavy on her shoulders. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsing her words, anticipating the princess's questions. But now, standing before the princess of Zerith, nothing seemed certain. Would the princess dismiss her? Would her explanations be enough? The moment felt as if the entire universe was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Princess Ilara's voice broke the silence, calm but full of authority. "Dr. Elena Carter, you claim that humans can survive without the ability to reproduce year-round. Tell me then, How do you thrive in such a state? What makes you different from other species that are more efficient in their reproduction? Elena took a deep breath. This was the heart of the challenge. She had to prove that humanity was more than just its biological limitations. She stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with conviction. Your Highness, the ability to reproduce year-round is not the only measure of survival. Yes, humans face biological cycles, but we also have something that no other species, perhaps even your own, can understand: our ability to adapt. Ilara leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. Adapt? She asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. Explain, then, how you adapt. What makes you so special, humans, if you cannot overcome the most basic of biological limitations? Elena nodded, knowing this was the moment to get her point across. She glanced at the holographic screens around them, displaying images of Earth's vast landscapes, cities, forests, oceans, and deserts. Humans have faced many challenges throughout history. We have lived through droughts, famines, and harsh climates. And yet, we adapt. We develop technology, create new ways to communicate, build shelter, and even find ways to grow food in places where survival seems impossible. It's not just about biology. It's about the human spirit. We push forward, even when the odds are against us. Princess Ilara's eyes flickered with interest, but her expression remained unreadable. So you claim that it is not your biology, but your spirit, that allows you to survive. How do you explain your limited reproduction? Then, surely, if your species was truly resilient, it would overcome such a fundamental weakness. Elena smiled faintly. The concept of survival for humans is more than just reproduction. We create families, communities, and networks of support. We are a species that thrives not just because of our biology, but because of our relationships, our bonds with one another. A human mother doesn't just bring a child into the world. She creates a future. Families work together to raise the next generation, and communities ensure that no one is left behind. The strength of humanity lies in its unity. Princess Ilara's gaze softened, ever so slightly, though she quickly regained her composure. You say that your species thrives through emotional bonds, but how can you be sure that your emotional connections are enough to overcome the challenges that nature presents? If your reproduction is limited, then how do you ensure the survival of your species in the long run? Elena's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly gathered her thoughts. She knew this was the critical point, one where she could either prove her argument or lose the challenge entirely. She had to show the princess that human survival wasn't just about overcoming nature. It was about understanding and adapting to it in ways that no other species could. Our species may not reproduce year-round, Your Highness, but we are deeply connected to the natural world. Our ability to plan, to work together, and to innovate means that even when resources are scarce, we find a way to make the most of what we have. Humans may have seasons of reproduction, but in between we build, we learn, we teach, and through that, we pass on knowledge that ensures our species continues to evolve. Princess Ilara seemed to ponder this for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she examined Elena with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The silence between them was thick with tension, and Elena couldn't tell whether her words were making an impact. Could the princess see what made humans different? Could she understand that survival for humanity was not simply about reproduction, but about the ability to adapt, learn, and support one another? Finally, Ilara spoke, her voice thoughtful, yet challenging. You speak of community and adaptation, but I remain unconvinced. What makes your species so remarkable is that you've managed to survive without constant reproduction. But does that truly make you strong? Or have you simply learned to survive in spite of your weaknesses? Elena's heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment she had been dreading. The princess's challenge was only just beginning. But Elena stood tall, determined. It's not about being perfect, Your Highness. It's about the strength to persevere, even when everything seems impossible. We may not reproduce year-round, but we never give up. We are not defined by our limitations. We are defined by our will to survive and thrive, no matter what. There was a long pause as the princess stared at Alina, her expression inscrutable. The tension in the room hung like a storm cloud, ready to burst. Would Ilara finally see what made humanity truly remarkable, or would she remain unmoved, convinced that her species had the superior way of life? The answer would come soon, but for now, Alina had done all she could. The first encounter was over, but the true test had only just begun. Unexpected revelation. The tension in the grand hall of Zerith was palpable. Princess Ilara remained silent, her gaze never leaving Dr. Alina Carter. The alien princess had heard many arguments, but there was something in the human's words that continued to intrigue her. Alina had spoken of community, of resilience, of emotional connections that sustained humanity. But despite her curiosity, Ilara was still unconvinced. Could such abstract concepts really be enough to secure humanity's place in the universe? Was survival truly possible without a biological advantage like year-round reproduction? As Ilara sat and thought, Alina couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. She had made her case, laid out humanity's strength and unity, but the princess seemed unmoved. Alina's mind raced. What more could she offer? How could she change Ilara's mind when the alien princess had seen worlds where reproduction was as constant as the rise and fall of the stars? What was it that could finally shift Ilara's perspective? Just as the silence threatened to swallow them both, Alina had an idea. She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but firm. "Your Highness," she began, her words carrying a new weight. "I know you value efficiency. I know you believe that only through constant reproduction can a species truly thrive. But let me tell you something you might not have considered. The human ability to adapt, to change, and to learn from each generation. It's not just about survival. It's about something deeper." Princess Ilara tilted her head, sensing the shift in Alina's tone. "Deeper?" Ilara echoed, her eyes narrowing slightly. And what could be deeper than survival itself? Alina's heart quickened, but she continued. "What makes humanity unique is that we don't just survive in isolation. We build connections, relationships that last for lifetimes. We create cultures that allow us to rise above our natural limits. Our true strength lies not in our biology, but in our creativity, our ability to dream beyond the constraints of nature." Ilara's lips parted in a subtle gesture of surprise. "Creativity," she mused. "Is that how you survive? Through your creativity?" "Yes," Alina answered, her voice gaining confidence. "Humans create. We build cities, invent tools, and write stories that help us understand the world. Through art, technology, and science, we transcend what our biology dictates. We learn from our mistakes, we innovate, and we pass on that knowledge, generation after generation." Princess Ilara remained still for a moment, clearly processing Alina's words. There was something about the way the human spoke, the depth of emotion in her voice, that caused the princess to pause. Ilara had always thought of survival in terms of raw biology, year-round reproduction, endless cycles of life and death. It had never occurred to her that there might be another, more profound way to thrive. The princess stood up slowly, her silver form glowing under the dim lights of the hall. She walked toward a massive window that overlooked the alien landscape, a vast city with towering spires and gleaming lights stretching into the horizon. She stared at it, lost in thought. The silence between them stretched longer now, filled with the weight of new realizations. Alina watched the princess closely, sensing that something was shifting within her. Then, in a voice much softer than before, Ilara spoke. "You say that humanity's strength lies in its ability to create, to transcend biological limits. But how do you explain your need for reproduction at all? Why not abandon it, if you are capable of so much without it?" Alina's heart skipped. This was the breakthrough moment. She took a breath, grounding herself. "Your Highness," she began carefully, "we don't abandon reproduction. But we understand that it's not just about creating life. It's about creating meaning. Humans believe that life is precious because it is finite. The limited nature of our reproduction makes every life, every relationship, and every connection that much more significant. Ilara's gaze softened. For the first time in their conversation, she seemed to understand the depth of Elena's words. So, your need to reproduce is not just a biological imperative. It is something more, something that gives meaning to your existence. Yes, Elena replied, her voice firm with the truth she had come to believe. For humans, life is a gift. We don't take it for granted. Our connections to one another, our families, our friends, our communities, are what make us truly alive. It's this ability to love, to build relationships, and to create a future together that has allowed humanity to thrive, even without the advantage of constant reproduction. Princess Ilara remained silent, her eyes distant as she contemplated Elena's words. The shock was evident in her face. For so long, she had believed that survival was simply a matter of biological function, how efficiently a species could reproduce and grow. But Elena's argument had struck a chord. Could it be that humanity had something that Zerithians, and perhaps every other species, lacked? A deeper, more meaningful connection to life itself. The princess turned back toward Elena, her silver eyes meeting the humans with a new intensity. You speak of meaning, of connection, of a future built not on biology, but on something far greater. But how can a species truly thrive if they are bound by the limitations of biology, even in their emotions? Elena smiled gently. It is because of those limitations, Your Highness, that humanity finds its greatest strength. We don't take life for granted. We cherish every moment, every relationship. It's our limitations that make us resilient, that drive us to create and adapt. And in doing so, we found a way to make the impossible possible. For the first time, Princess Ilara seemed to understand. The challenge was no longer about proving who was biologically superior. It was about understanding the depths of what it meant to be human. The princess took a deep breath, her expression softening in a way Elena had never expected. You have shown me a perspective I had not considered, Ilara said quietly, her voice filled with respect. Perhaps there is more to life than just survival. Perhaps your strength lies in your ability to create meaning, even in the face of your limitations. The room fell silent again, but this time, the air was filled with a sense of realization. The princess had seen something in humanity that she hadn't understood before, something that transcended biology, something that made humans truly unique in the vastness of the universe. Elena's heart soared as she realized that, just perhaps, she had done the impossible. The unexpected revelation was not just about survival. It was about what it meant to truly live. Cultural differences. The atmosphere in the Grand Hall of Zerith had shifted. What began as a battle of logic and biology was now evolving into a deeper exploration of humanity's essence. Princess Ilara, who had once been so sure that her species' ability to reproduce year-round was the key to survival, now found herself grappling with ideas she had never considered. Elena's words had planted seeds of doubt, and now, Ilara was left to wonder, could there be something more to survival than just efficiency? The room was still, the only sound the soft hum of alien machinery as the two women faced each other across the gleaming chamber. Elena stood tall, her heart still racing from the depth of their conversation. She knew they were on the cusp of something significant. But there was one more point to address, one more challenge to face. Princess Ilara spoke first, her voice no longer filled with skepticism but a genuine curiosity. You say that your strength lies in your ability to form emotional connections and create meaning. That you build families and communities, and through those bonds, you adapt. But tell me, how do you explain the way your species views reproduction itself? If emotions are so important, how do you explain the detachment, the complexity that surrounds it? In my world, reproduction is a natural, essential part of life. It is not clouded by emotion or social structures. Why is reproduction so central to humanity's identity? Elena hesitated for a moment, taken aback by the princess's question. The difference in their cultures was stark. Zerithians saw reproduction as a biological process, devoid of the emotional intricacies that humans experienced. To them, it was simply a matter of continuity, a cycle that never stopped, without the emotional weight that humans placed on it. Your Highness, Elena began carefully. For humans, reproduction is more than just a biological necessity. It's a deeply personal, cultural, and emotional experience. It's tied to love, to relationships, to the future of humanity. Reproduction in our world isn't just about creating new life. It's about passing down values, traditions, and dreams. Ilara's silver eyes glinted with thought as she listened intently, her curiosity piqued. And yet, she said, her voice measured, your species has created so much: cities, art, science, without constant reproduction. What drives you to build such things if your biology is so limited? What compels you to push beyond your natural boundaries? Elena smiled, a sense of understanding beginning to bloom between them. Because, Your Highness, humans don't just live for themselves. We live for the future. The creations you see, our cities, our art, our science, are driven by the knowledge that every moment is precious. That's why we build, why we innovate. We create because we know that life is finite. We know that the future we create is one that will be inherited by the generations to come. It's not just for us, it's for them. Princess Ilara took a step back, her expression thoughtful as she considered Elena's words. She had always believed that her species was superior, that the constant flow of reproduction gave them the edge. But Elena's explanation made her wonder. Could it be that humans found something even greater in their limitations, a purpose beyond survival? Ilara turned away, walking to a nearby window that overlooked the vast alien city. In my world, she said softly, we view reproduction as a natural, inevitable process. There is no need to attach emotions to it. It is simply a part of life's rhythm. But your species places so much weight on it. You form bonds, you create families, and you invest so much of yourselves into your future. It is both beautiful and perplexing. Elena approached the princess, her voice gentle yet firm. Your Highness, the beauty of human reproduction lies in its connection to everything else. It's the foundation of our families, our societies, and our cultures. But it's not just about bringing life into the world. It's about the values we pass on. It's about the love we give to one another. And it's about creating a future that's worth living. Ilara's expression softened, and for a brief moment, she seemed to see humanity not through the lens of its biological limitations, but through the depth of its emotional and cultural complexities. She turned back to Elena, her voice quieter now, laced with respect. Your species, you give so much meaning to something that we have always seen as simple and natural. Perhaps there is strength in that. Perhaps your bonds, your ability to create, to love, to dream, are what make you truly resilient. Elena's heart swelled with pride, not just for herself, but for humanity. She had done it. She had shown the princess that human strength wasn't just about biology. It was about heart, about connection, about something that transcended the physical. But there was still more to be said. The differences between their cultures were vast, but for the first time, Ilara seemed to understand what Elena had been trying to convey. You are right, Your Highness, Elena continued, her voice filled with warmth. It's the connections we form, the love we give, and the future we build together that define us. It's those emotional bonds that drive us to create, to learn, and to innovate. And through that, we adapt. It's not just about survival. It's about living a life that is meaningful. Princess Ilara nodded slowly, her mind clearly shifting. I see now that humanity's strength is not in its ability to reproduce, but in its ability to transform, to create meaning, and to evolve. Perhaps that is why you have thrived for so long. The room was filled with a quiet reverence as the two women stood there, across from each other, their cultural differences slowly bridging with understanding. Princess Ilara had come into this challenge thinking that humanity's limitations would be its downfall. Now she was beginning to see that those very limitations were what gave humanity its depth, its resilience, and its hope for the future. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with the unspoken respect that had been earned through dialogue, through the sharing of ideas and experiences. And as the princess looked at Alina, her mind was no longer fixed on what humanity lacked, but on what it had gained in its journey. Perhaps, just perhaps, Earth's greatest strength lay not in its biology, but in its capacity for meaning, for connection, and for hope. The cultural differences were vast, but the realization that humanity's true power lay in its emotional bonds and adaptability was something that even an advanced species like the Zerithians could respect. And with that, the challenge had truly begun to take a new shape. The princess's challenge reversed. The atmosphere in the grand hall of Zerith had shifted once again. The conversation had moved from one of skepticism and challenge to a deeper, more philosophical exchange. Princess Ilara, who had initially viewed humanity with disdain for its biological limitations, now found herself contemplating the very core of what it meant to live. The intellectual battle had evolved into a discussion of purpose, meaning, and the essence of existence itself. Alina stood across from the princess, her heart still racing, but now filled with a new sense of determination. She had made her case, explaining how humanity's ability to form emotional bonds, build communities, and adapt to challenges had allowed Earth to thrive despite its limited reproductive capacity. Yet she knew that the challenge wasn't over. Not yet. The princess, despite her softened tone, had not fully embraced the idea that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its biology, but in its capacity for emotional depth and resilience. Ilara's silver eyes sparkled with a hint of something new. Curiosity, perhaps, or the dawning realization that there was more to the human story than she had previously believed. She leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but firm, carrying the weight of someone who had been challenged in ways they never expected. "Dr. Carter," Ilara began, her words measured and deliberate, "I have listened to your arguments, and I admit that there is merit to what you say. Your species is far more complex than I initially believed. Your ability to create meaning from your limitations, to form bonds and connections that transcend biological necessity. It is intriguing." Alina's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. She had come this far, and now the princess was beginning to see what she had always hoped. But Ilara continued, her voice gaining strength. "You speak of connection, of creating meaning, and of transcending your biology. You speak of love, of family, of hope. Yet, I cannot help but wonder, how do you define true survival if you are so dependent on these emotional bonds? What happens when your connections break, when your communities fail? What happens when hope is lost? Can humanity truly thrive when faced with the collapse of everything that holds dear?" Alina blinked, taken aback by the princess's words. For a moment, she felt a twinge of uncertainty. Could she convince Ilara that humans didn't just survive based on emotion alone, that there was something else, something even deeper, that allowed humanity to persevere when all seemed lost? The princess's gaze remained steady, her silver eyes locking onto Alina's with an intensity that seemed to cut through the tension in the room. "Your species has demonstrated resilience, yes," Ilara said, her voice unwavering. "But what happens when that resilience is tested beyond its limits? What happens when your emotional connections are stripped away, when survival itself is at stake, and all that remains is raw instinct?" Alina paused. It was a question she had never expected, but one that held an undeniable weight. Could humanity truly survive when the very things that made them human, love, connection, hope, were torn away? What was left when the foundations of society crumbled and survival was no longer about community, but about bare existence? For a long moment, Alina struggled to find the words. She thought back to the darkest times in human history, the wars, the natural disasters, the moments when humanity had faced its greatest challenges. In those times, when hope seemed all but lost, it wasn't just the emotional bonds that had kept humanity going. It was the fierce drive to rebuild, to create once more, to ensure that the sacrifices of the past were not in vain. Humans didn't just survive. They adapted, they learned, and they found new ways to push forward. Slowly, Alina spoke, her voice firm and resolute. "Your Highness, you are right to question the limits of resilience. But let me ask you this. What is the point of survival if there is no hope for the future? What is the point of living if there is no meaning behind it? Humans are not simply survivors. We are creators. Even when everything is lost, we rebuild. Even when our communities fail, we find new ways to connect. When everything else is gone, what remains is the will to move forward, the belief that life can always be made better." Ilara's expression softened, though she was still lost in thought. "So you say that when all is lost, humanity does not give up, but rather finds a new path forward. That survival is not just about existing, but about finding a purpose, even in the darkest moments." "Yes," Alina replied, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "That's what makes us different. Even in the face of destruction, humans do not give up. We rise from the ashes, we learn from our failures, and we forge ahead, stronger than before. Our ability to adapt, to create new solutions, new dreams, and new hopes is what defines us." Princess Ilara's eyes flickered with something akin to awe. For the first time, she seemed to truly understand the essence of humanity's strength. It wasn't just about biology, or even emotional bonds. It was about the spirit of humanity. The unyielding drive to continue, to rebuild, and to create meaning, no matter the obstacles. For a long moment, there was silence between them. Ilara's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw the humans in a light she had never considered before, not as fragile beings bound by their biology, but as a species with a remarkable capacity to overcome, to adapt, and to thrive in ways that went far beyond survival. "Perhaps I have underestimated you, Dr. Carter," Ilara said finally, her voice tinged with newfound respect. "I came here thinking that your limitations would define you. But I see now that it is your very limitations that make you stronger. It is your resilience, your ability to adapt, and your drive to create meaning that set you apart." Alina smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell within her. The challenge had been difficult, but she had done it. She had shown the princess that humanity was not just a species bound by biology, but one that had the power to shape its own destiny, no matter the circumstances. Princess Ilara stepped forward, her silver eyes filled with respect and admiration. "You have taught me more than I could have imagined, Dr. Carter. Perhaps the true measure of a species lies not in how it survives, but in how it chooses to live." In that moment, the challenge was no longer a battle. It was a shared understanding, a bridge between two worlds. And as Ilara and Alina stood there, face to face, both women knew that something extraordinary had just taken place, a moment of growth, not just for the princess, but for humanity itself. The final decision. The Grand Hall of Zerith was bathed in the soft glow of alien lights, casting long shadows across the floor. Princess Ilara stood at the center, her silvery figure almost ethereal against the backdrop of the towering palace. Her mind, once firmly rooted in the beliefs of her species, had shifted. She no longer viewed humanity as a limited species bound by seasonal reproduction, but as a civilization with something far more powerful: the ability to adapt, to create, and to find meaning in life despite the odds. Alina stood across from her, having shared the deepest truths of humanity. What had started as a confrontation had blossomed into an exchange of wisdom. They were no longer adversaries. They were two beings, one human, one alien, engaged in a moment of mutual understanding. The tension that had hung between them like a storm cloud was now replaced with something else: respect. The princess's challenge had led to revelations that neither could have anticipated. After a long silence, Ilara spoke, her voice calm but filled with an almost reverent tone. "Dr. Carter, I came here with a challenge, to prove that your species was too weak to survive in the way we do, without the constant flow of reproduction. I thought your kind's limitations would be your downfall. But now, I see I was wrong." Elena stood still, her heart racing, as she processed the weight of Ilara's words. She had feared this moment, the fear that despite her best efforts, she might fail. But this was more than she could have hoped for. Ilara wasn't just acknowledging humanity's resilience. She was recognizing something much deeper. "Your species has shown me something that I had never considered before," Ilara continued. "I had always thought that strength came from biology, from the ability to reproduce endlessly. But your strength, humanity's strength, is not in your biology at all. It is in your spirit, your ability to adapt, to create meaning in your lives. Even when you face the greatest challenges, you do not simply survive. You find new ways to thrive, to rebuild." Elena took a slow breath, trying to steady the emotions rushing through her. She had done it. She had shown the princess that humanity's greatest gift was its capacity to evolve, to adapt, and to overcome, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Ilara's gaze softened as she took a step toward Elena, her expression filled with admiration. "I see now that your limitations, your seasonal reproduction, are not what define you. What defines you is your ability to dream, to hope, and to forge ahead when all seems lost. I have never met a species with such resilience, such drive to create meaning in a world that is constantly changing." The weight of those words hung in the air, and Elena couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. She had not only defended humanity's worth, but had also opened the eyes of an entire alien civilization to a truth they had never considered. The challenge was over, and humanity had won, not through superior biology, but through the strength of its spirit. "Dr. Carter," Ilara said, her voice now full of respect, "I offer you my respect and the respect of my people. You have proven that humanity is not just a species bound by biological cycles. You are a species of great depth, great strength, and even greater potential. I had thought your world weak because it did not follow the same rhythms we do. But I see now that your differences make you stronger than I ever could have imagined." Elena, humbled and overwhelmed, bowed slightly. "Thank you, Your Highness. It means more than words can express. But the true strength of humanity is not in proving others wrong. It's in embracing our challenges and learning from them. We may have limitations, but we use them to shape a future full of possibility." Princess Ilara nodded, her silver eyes gleaming with a newfound respect. "Your species does not let its limitations define its future. And for that, you have earned not just my respect, but a place in the history of our galaxy. I will share your story with the people of Zerith. Perhaps in time, we will learn something from you as well." The princess stepped back, her regal posture radiating authority once again. But now there was a gentleness to her presence, a softness that had not been there before. She extended her hand to Elena, an offering of solidarity between their species. Elena hesitated for a moment, then accepted the gesture, feeling the weight of the moment. This was more than just a victory. It was the beginning of something new. A bridge had been formed between Earth and Zerith, not based on biological superiority, but on the shared understanding that every species, no matter how different, had its own unique strength. "Your challenge, Your Highness, has taught me something too," Elena said quietly. "It's not just about proving ourselves to others. It's about understanding that every species has something valuable to offer. I hope that in time, humanity and Zerith can learn from each other, share our knowledge, and grow together." Princess Ilara smiled, a rare and beautiful expression that softened her regal features. "Perhaps that is the true purpose of this challenge, to understand that despite our differences, we are all connected. We all have something to teach, something to learn." As Elena turned to leave the grand hall, her heart light, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond proving a point. Humanity had faced a challenge and emerged victorious, not because they had outlasted their biological limitations, but because they had demonstrated the power of human connection, adaptability, and hope. The alien princess had been convinced, but more importantly, humanity's story had been told, and in the vastness of the universe, it was a story worth hearing. The final decision had been made, not just by Ilara, but by both of them. And it was a decision that would change the course of history for both humanity and Zereth.